and welcome to Off the Lot. The film industry is changing fast, and if you want to make movies, it's time to become your own gatekeeper. If you've got a vision and the drive to make it happen, this podcast is for you.
We're your hosts, Ken Kapitov and Anthony Epp. Every week, we dive into the hustle, challenges, and real-world strategies of independent filmmaking. We'll talk to directors, producers, and industry pros about what it really takes to get your film made on your own terms.
So if you're serious about making movies, hit follow or subscribe. It really helps us keep this going. And if you like what you hear, spread the word. Share the episode, leave a comment, and help more indie filmmakers find Off the Lot. Let's dive in. All right, Anthony Epp, how are you, sir?
I am doing great. How are you doing?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I mean, juggling sort of the indie film side of things with the TV side of things. On the TV side, I have 4 different pilots that are moving forward in some degree. We're trying to package 2 of them. One of them, we're trying to get a showrunner on board who's reading it right now. Another pilot script, we have a pilot director attached. On top of that, we're trying to package the star right now. So we've had one major A-lister read the script and they loved it. They're not really sure if they're going to come on board. So we have another person reading it right now who's also amazing, whom everybody knows. And it's just been a really fun process because I haven't been in this stage of development for a very long time with a TV show. And so having people who you know and love read the script and fall in love with the script and then start having discussions about where things are at. It's very fun. Obviously, none of it is a sure thing. It can all fall apart tomorrow, and that's sort of how this business works, right? But the last few weeks have been great on the development side of this one series. And then I have another pilot that we're going to use as a writing sample and start sending that out to producers. Yeah, and then even another one that is like we're being commissioned to write, and so it's just been sort of a crazy few weeks on the TV side, which is odd because the industry right now, especially in TV, is totally dead. I mean, look, anybody who's in the industry listening to this right now knows how hard it is right now out there. This major contraction that's happening between, all of the streamers and the broadcasters, and that's sort of due to the strikes and inflation, and then these trade wars now are causing uncertainty in the industry. Although funny enough, with everything going on in terms of the US-Canada trade war, the Canadian dollar is tanking right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then last week, the BC government raised the tax credits from 35 to 40% for BC-based productions. So this is an effort to, buy Canadian and create more Canadian content. It's just also really good for anybody that's coming to Canada or specifically British Columbia wanting to spend money. So I haven't checked what the dollar is today. But if it's below 70 cents, that is great for any American studio that wants to bring their show to Vancouver or Toronto, etc. So I think in the long run, as far as the film industry goes and the production side of things here in Vancouver, it's probably going to be pretty good, actually, later this year. But yeah, all of that to say, we're trying to get our own Canadian show off the ground as well. So we're writing that, and then the movie side of things, It's busy. I don't know. It's like every single day is something new, and you're running around with your hair on fire. But that's what we love to do.
We certainly do, and it's funny that you say it that way because there is definitely this sort of made in Canada feeling going on right now, which has done everything for our purposes to just keep bolstering the development of homegrown projects here. As you were
Yeah.
saying, the 40% tax rebate or tax rebate that the BC government just put in is already quite a big step. More than that, there's this renewed sense that we have to make our own stuff.
Yeah. Totally.
And my hope is that not just in that business sense of things, but in the cultural sense that Canada starts to really embrace the idea that we've been relying on our southern neighbors for so long for our content that maybe it's time that we develop our own up here a little bit more. And everything I've seen in the social media space is about buy Canadian, make it in Canada, and support Canadian artists and support Canadian businesses, especially for our movie that we're developing.
Which
It's just
literally has the word Canadian in the title.
yeah, it's the Quiet Canadians, and it's very very much a movie that is every discussion I've had in the last week with people about it has gone, wow, this is the movie that needs to be made right now here.
Yeah.
because it is the perfect kind of film. I mean, our without giving anything away, our main lead antagonist is an American, so it's a
Nice.
very it's a very appropriate story for what we're dealing with right now. Not in an anti-American kind of sentiment, but just more in a tapping into that feeling we all are having right now about cultural patriotism and feeling like we need to be telling our own stories and telling fun stories in Canada and hiring our own people.
Yeah, totally. And I really hope that, Telefilm and Creative BC and the other funding bodies that are out there and provincial organizations, and if anybody's listening to this, right? I really hope that they are looking at not just the cultural aspects of the projects being submitted, but the commercial aspects as well. Because we really, really have to think about now, how can we create more Canadian jobs with Canadian TV, with Canadian film, and not just create, dramas that may do well at a film festival, but not really contribute to either the growth of somebody's career or create more opportunities and jobs for the people that are involved in those movies. And so I'm urging Telefilm and Creative BC and these other bodies to really take that into consideration, right? We have to actually start creating a much more commercial film industry in this country. We have the infrastructure. We have some of the best crews in the world and the best studio space and the best locations, right? Drive an hour in any direction outside of Vancouver and you have a different landscape, right? Vancouver, I've worked on many pilots where Vancouver doubles for Los Angeles, we double for New York, we can do Korea, the Apple Show. There are so many different things you can do in Vancouver. Toronto has its own set of faculties, but it's just we're able to do it here. And so we need to start funding our own projects a little bit more and create a viable industry where, yeah, we don't have to rely on American studios necessarily to make it happen.
I think that you're right when you say that Telefilm and Creative BC need to step up, but I also think that that this is the time for the business community and for Canadians with the means to do so to start funding arts
Yeah.
in a stronger way. This isn't just about relying on the government to step in with Telefilm and Creative BC. They provide a certain resource that we're all trying to take advantage of, but there's real opportunities now uh, for private business and to put their stamp on stuff. Like imagine if private business got involved in the movie industry and started sponsoring or just putting their money where their mouth was and
But a
providing
straight up
resources.
tax write-off for your investment
Yeah,
in a film that is going to create jobs, let people
right.
put food on the table. It is a write-off for a major corporation here or even a small, few million-dollar corporation, and it benefits everyone. That
Yeah.
is a no-brainer right now.
And you slap your name or your logo on it and you've got a legacy, right? Like you've got this legacy of whether that's as they always say, a movie lasts forever. Like once a movie's made, it exists forever. There
There's
is
gonna be
no.
so many executive producer dentists out there. It's gonna be
Yeah, yeah,
amazing.
there you go, there you go. If you've ever, don't spend money on golf equipment. Put $10,000 into an independent film and be a movie mogul for a month.
I'm sort of inspired by what Darren Smith has done he's in Utah, right? And just getting, doing these gatherings where it's just all investors who are kind of toying with the idea of getting into film. Why don't we do something like that? Why don't we hold an event, an off the lot party, and it's a film investor party, and we just get people together and start connecting people, because
Yeah,
that's really the
yeah,
problem is how do you find people that have money that are toying with the idea of getting into film and are able to take the risk, et cetera, but are interested in creating something that lasts forever, allows them to experience something new, be on a film set, and tell their family, like, look, I made a movie. And hey, by the way, this movie is really good and it might be successful. Oh, and you might actually make a whole bunch of money back.
yeah, and then let's work on the verticals. Let's work on this idea, not the vertical series, but the verticals of distribution where we've got independently owned movie theaters, and we've got the Cineplex and Landmark movie theater chains that are. I mean, Cineplex is a Canadian company. Start putting some of this back into some money back into the theatrical experience, so that independent theaters are incentivized to play domestic made productions and hold screenings and so on, so that they can make some money and also build audiences around Canada. And then Cineplex, we should be lobbying them to of their 14 screens in a theater, like hold off one or two screens that are designated purely for domestic made production. Again, I don't the money here might be, it might take some time to build that up, but I'm willing to bet you that especially with domestic production, like if I made a movie or if I was involved in a movie and it was playing, involved in a movie now that's playing at Cineplex in Tinseltown, and I'm telling everybody to go
Give
see
it a
it.
plug. We can promote it.
Yeah, well, Island Between Tides, the Island Between Tides, which is a film I was an assistant director on, in we shot it in 2022 up in Prince Rupert, and it opened on Friday this past week in Vancouver and Prince Rupert, which is where it was filmed, but also here on Cineplex theaters, and it had a sold out weekend, and so it's been held over for another week
That's great.
in
Okay.
both theaters, and I guess and there's plans for it to open up in other theaters in Canada. This is what this is what it's for, right? Like that's what I believe we need to be doing more of. We need to have these event style cinematic experiences that then drive ticket sales, because then Cineplex Odeon sees the value in putting a movie like that in a movie theater, because there's a built-in audience to want to go see it, especially that built-in audience is the filmmakers and their friends. They're going to push it for 2
Yeah.
weeks at least to get their friends and family out to go see it. So you're gonna have a sold out, we had a sold out screening on Friday, and there was a sold out 7 and a sold out 10 o'clock screening of
I
that
tried to
film
go and I couldn't because it was sold out.
because it was
So I'm
sold
gonna
out.
have to now. Thank God it's being held over because now I have a
Yeah.
chance to see it.
Yeah, and it's all it's all Canadian crew made by Canadians, and a really, a very fun little ghost story, um, that delivers and sounds amazing in a movie theater. Like honestly, it's one of those movies that the sound design and the music in it are so powerful that you have to see it in a movie theater in order to get the full experience of watching that film.
Very
Like
cool.
watching it at home, you'll need a big screen and a surround sound system, but this is one that we're definitely the theatrical experience really hits home.
How about you? What else is going on in your world besides Quiet Canadians, or is that taking up all of your time right now?
That's we've talked about diversifying, but that's really been this past week. The kind of the 80% of my life has been around trying to put pieces in place for the Quiet Canadians. So what's been great is we have the Creative BC application, which is due in a couple of weeks, and that's a grant that Creative BC gives out every year. We're putting together sort of our key creative team. We already have kind of our core producing team on board. We're now putting together our key creative team, becoming a bit of like an interview process and bringing people in and sort of talking to them about what we see and how they can fit into the vision of the film. What was really cool was today we, as a producing team, sat down and did some script notes, which is sort of funny because it's the first time we've done any real script notes for months on the
Mhm.
story. And it was fun to go back and relook at it and go, oh, okay, let's start thinking about how to make this movie better. Like let's start thinking about how do we make the story, how do we improve some areas of the story.
It's also great to come back to it and have fresh eyes, right? And we
Yeah,
just again
yeah.
some time away from the script, fresh eyes. It makes such a huge difference.
Yeah, and getting some outside feedback, especially from people who are on the producing team who have a vested interest in seeing this thing be as good as it can be, and getting a lot of ideas on the table, but then having opening up that collaboration to say, okay, well, best idea wins. The one that we all
Yeah.
that gives us that aha moment is the one that we decide we are going to go with.
All right, so that brings us to the main portion of this week's episode, our interview with an incredible indie film producer named Amanda Verhagen, who is known for her remarkable contributions to Hollywood North. With a diverse portfolio spanning notable projects like A Nice Indian Boy starring Jonathan Groff and Karan Soni, the darkly comedic It's a Wonderful Knife featuring Joel McHale and Justin Long, and the thought-provoking The Dead Don't Hurt, directed by and starring Viggo Mortensen, Amanda has cemented her status as a prominent figure in the film industry.
Her versatility shines through in her work on projects such as Love Me, starring Kristen Stewart and Stephen Yeun, and the highly anticipated upcoming feature Longing, starring Richard Gere. Amanda's dedication to storytelling has made her a leading producer in the field. So without further ado, here's our chat with Amanda.
So, Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited to talk to you all about indie producing and everything that comes with that. You're a line producer, you're a producer, you've developed projects yourself, you have a studio. But I think before that, it would just be great to dive into like, how did you get into film? Is this always something you wanted to do, become a producer?
Yeah, I was a child actor, unfortunately. So I was forced into this a little bit by my mother, who really wanted to be an actor, but then had kids and didn't end up getting to do it. So she was like, "You go do it." And while I was a child actor, I did a lot of theater shows and I toured around and I would watch everybody move all the sets. And I just kept thinking at like 8 years old, there's a more efficient way to do that. And I'm like, yeah, that I'm probably in the wrong department. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not meant to be an actor. So I spent years, pretending I should have been an actor when really I was just, a loud talker. And I ended up making my way backstage and I loved, behind the scenes. And then I got my degree in theater production. And then I had this amazing teacher in theater school at UVic who sat me down one day and was like, listen, if you're going to work in theater the rest of your life, you're never going to see windows again. Like, you're going to be in a dark room. Your life's going to be tough. You're never going to make money because theater in Canada doesn't make money. And like, it's going to be really challenging on you. And like, these are the realities of working in this industry. And it was a very eye-opening moment because I think a lot of times people look at working in the entertainment industry as this like really glamorous thing, but nobody sits you down and
Yeah.
tells you the realities of things. So I pivoted to film, which, I now have windows.
Much better.
Yeah, I get to see the sunlight, and there are more opportunities for different paths in terms of like ways you make money or how you do things, and just more opportunities that way. But I still
Yeah.
get to do what I love, which is just bringing people together, giving them the opportunity to do their best at their work, and creating art.
And so what drove you into sort of the logistics side of filmmaking? Because that's seems to be the path you've taken.
Yeah, when I went to business school after theater school, and when I was there, I got a call being like, "Hey, can you come PA on a movie?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." I had no idea what that meant. I was like, "I don't know what this acronym is," but I had debt and I needed to pay my bills, and it sounded like it paid money. And then I spent a week watching the two-holer and just standing outside the bathrooms and watching everybody and seeing what they did. And I remember someone coming up to me and saying, "Man, that production manager is really tough. They're making us all recycle." And I was like, wow, if someone can force people to recycle, they must be really
They
important.
must be
Yeah.
powerful, yes.
Yeah. I was like, I want to do that. So I went the next week and I quit business school and I moved to Vancouver from the island
Wow.
Oh,
based on
wow.
that line. Like, that was it. Back then, you could get jobs on Craigslist, and it wasn't, like, sketchy and weird,
Mhm.
because we didn't have, like, Facebook groups or, like, stuff like that to find, employment. So I went on I went on Craigslist, and I found a job posting for a 3D television company because that was a cool thing back then. And I got a job as a producer's assistant at this 3D TV company in White Rock. And I watched and observed everything they did. And I listened in on all their phone calls that I probably shouldn't have and picked up all the lingo I could. And then I talked my way into a job production managing a $2 million feature.
Holy cow.
Wow.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was like 20. Like, I had no business doing it, because we didn't have Zoom. Nobody knew how old you were because you were just on the phone. Like,
Right.
there
Yeah.
was no vetting people as well as we do these days. And I showed up to the production office on the first day, and the producer opened the door and he went, "Oh shit," and then closed the door. So I ended up doing the movie, and they ended up giving me a coordinator credit, and it was a whole big drama political thing. But I ended up being the production manager and the coordinator and doing some of the accounting. But I had never worked on a movie before, so people would come into my office, and I would. Get all their questions, and then I would let them leave. And then I would open my drawer, and I still have the book up here somewhere. But I would open this book. It was like Production for Dummies, and I would look up what they were asking me. It was like the definition of fake it until you make it.
Yeah.
For sure.
But
That's
I did
amazing.
such a good job on that movie that they asked me to do the next one. So it worked out really well. But I just literally like fell into it. Like,
That's
It's really
fantastic.
interesting because like a friend of mine is a production manager here in town and works on all, big shows and stuff. And we were talking about the job, and he's like, what I do isn't necessarily that difficult. Like, I'm not a rocket scientist. It's like it just comes down to logic and common sense. Like, we're just problem solving. And it's just that like these are really expensive problems and we have to figure out ways to find the solution. But like he's like, so that's where it's difficult, is just making it work. But the actual questions that you're getting, we can make it work. And it's just a lot of it's common sense, but it's
yeah,
just, it
well,
has to happen in a
I say for every position, attitude over experience. That's always been my hiring motto. And I think that also comes from maybe me coming from a place of not really being the most experienced person in the room ever. I've always been the youngest of most of the things I do. But I think if you have a great attitude, I can't teach that. But I can teach you what the lingo is of something. But if you have a great attitude, you're easier to work with. People are going to want to do things for you. It's going to be easier to collaborate with you. I would rather have one person who has a great attitude but doesn't really know 100% what the job is than 20 people who have been doing this for 50 years but like hate their job and are experts. It's much easier that way. So
Well, when you're spending 12, 15, 16 hours a day with somebody, yeah, I mean, it's why like on my productions, there's a no assholes policy, right? We just
that's same here. Yeah.
Right.
can't deal with it.
And that's permeating now to more productions, which is great. I'm seeing that more and more directors are coming to me and they're saying, but no assholes. I'm like, yes, that is the goal.
Yeah, as long as the director's not the one.
And then that's my problem. Shit. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's where
Hey,
the
Amanda.
producer comes in to deal with them.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. Amanda, just to help some people out, what exactly does a line producer do?
That is such a good question that I get all the time. It is a funny little position that not every film has, which is why it's not all widely known. It's kind of only on the 5 million and up films, I find. Because if you're doing a little like indie $1 million movie, you're not necessarily going to have a line producer. But I'm the person who, a studio calls or a company in the US calls and says, hey, we want to make a movie in BC or somewhere. We have this script. Can you tell us how much the script is going to be, how much it would cost to shoot there, what the resources are, and then I'll make them a budget. And if they like the budget and they're happy with my presentation of everything, then they'll come shoot it with me. And I'm the one who facilitates production for them. I have to make sure all of my people above the line are happy. So all of the producers, director, actors, all those lovely folks. And I also have to make sure all the people below the line are being taken care of. So working closely with the production manager and making sure that, everybody has what they need in order to facilitate their job properly. So it's literally producing the line between the below the line and above the line. You're not a producer in a sense where you have creative control on the project. I do believe everyone does have some creative input into a film, no matter what you're doing and no matter what your position, you're always going to have a creative touch point. But I'm not necessarily sitting there in the room developing the script or, financing the projects. I'm the one that's coming after the project's already financed, which is great.
But also, finding creative solutions to a financial problem, right? Like we can't afford to go there, we can't afford to do this, but what about this? Or,
Yeah, I try really hard never to say no. It's
Right.
always, what about?
What's and then just to sort of set the playing field, because you said you had production managed a film. What's the difference between a line producer and a production manager?
The biggest difference is a production manager is a director's guild position, which I am not in the director's guild. So in order to be in the DGC, you have to be a PA and work your way up and do all these days and blah, blah, blah. And I just never did that. I was a production coordinator for 10 years, which I loved. And I loved working in the office because it gave me an opportunity to have a touch point with every single department and learn what their pain points are, which was really, really important. And it's how I met Ken, which is great. And that was an invaluable education. Whereas if I had gone the PA route, you kind of, I find, only get an education in locations and the departments that touch location.
It's the same as coming in through any department, where you're sort of seeing it from the eyes of that perspective
Mhm.
of the department. Whereas in the production coordinator slash office area, because you're touching every department virtually equally.
Exactly, exactly. And a production manager is really focusing on the below the line, so the crew, taking care of them, and they are responsible for ensuring you're not going over budget. I like to set my team up so that my production manager is worried about what's happening on the day, and I'm worried about what happened yesterday and what's happening tomorrow, so that we're splitting up our workload that way. So they're really on set, like managing the day to day, and I'm figuring out like how the heck did we spend all that yesterday, and what's the cost reporting, and reporting everything to the studio and also making sure our logistics are ready for the next couple days.
Well, I really like what you touched on, which is that you come from the production office side of things and you spent a lot of time in the office because that's basically like the nucleus of the production. And so you get to talk to every single department and learn and see all of the paperwork that's coming through those departments and what the costs are for a lot of these things as well, right before they get approved to by the production manager and producer. So do you think that that's like a valuable path to take for somebody that wants to get into producing indies down the road, is like work on a production but be in the office?
Absolutely. The best part about working in the office too is like if you're going to go the independent producing route, is I was able to work it, and I shouldn't say this for all the folks that I worked with, and thank you for hiring me, but I was able to do my job in less time than I was actually there for, and then sit on my computer and produce my independent films.
Me
So working,
too. Guilty as
yeah,
charged. Yeah.
working in the office gave me an opportunity to not only meet wonderful people who help you out on your independent productions, ask them a million questions, learn about things, learn that pens are expensive, and do all those important lessons. But also, if I finish my work in a certain amount of time and I'm just in that hurry up and wait mode, I'm sending emails to sales agents, I'm booking meetings with distributors, I'm, doing all those things. And then I'm calling in sick when I have to shoot a film. Everyone in the industry is generally pretty supportive of if you are shooting your own independent project anyways. So
Yeah, Vancouver has a great support system that way in the union world for sure. That's how I ended up doing that Echoes presentation piece. Was I was in the office as the office PA, but because I was the office PA, I got a chance to talk to all of these department heads when they were prepping. Like no DP is sitting there for 12 hours in the office prepping the script. They're bored as hell sometimes and they're just like, "Can we just talk about something?" You can't
yeah,
do that when they're on set because it's really, really, really busy. But when people are in the office, that's a perfect time to network and talk and just, build relationships.
absolutely. Like when else do you get an opportunity to be like, wait, what does a set deck buyer do? How important are they? When does props actually need to start? What do you mean a props builder does what? Like there's so many positions in film that people don't realize exist or are needed. Construction is a whole other kit and caboodle that like people don't understand unless they actually sit there and go through the process of it. And it's such a privilege to be able to understand all of that. Working in a studio versus locations, it's like it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's a perspective that you're not going to get like if you only work on set, you're not going to get that perspective and know those details eventually, right? So,
Exactly. Yeah.
When you're talking about sort of the independent film route, because like you're saying you're producing your own independent films, what are you seeing as sort of the biggest difference between studio, like that studio work versus producing your own independent films?
Whether you want to make money or not. Um,
Fair.
that was,
So
yeah.
you don't want to make money, but you're still going to do it.
I mean, I always say, like, I told you earlier, like, I sold my soul to the American devil, which is totally fine. I love working on service stuff where they come here, take advantage of our tax credit, use our lovely crew, and
but you
I'm
also
so
love having a roof over your head and eating food.
yeah. Yeah, and it's not like I'm making content that doesn't matter. I generally get sent projects that I love and get to work on projects that are important to me, which is great. It's not like I'm making like really trash content. Having said that, there are, a lot of people in the world where they really want to make like their own stuff that they develop. And that's really where you're probably going down the telefilm route. And right now it's actually telefilm season. So I'm getting a lot of calls of,
Yeah.
hey, can you look at my telephone package? How do I do this? How do I do an audience engagement plan? All those things. We rely in Canada a lot on a grant system. And because we rely on a grant system, there isn't as much reward for producers. There isn't as much pay for your work. Whereas in the US, because you have investors, you are like, if you're making a film, you're really making a film because you have to pay your investors back. So chances are producers are like more likely to get paid. Whereas with a grant, it's like less risky. Independent producers are just really not like paid. And telefilm, like really, I think because there's a gap when you're financing because between tax credits, the telefilm money, and like maybe a broadcast license, chances are you are reinvesting your producer fees.
So I always say that a film costs the same whether it was made independently or by a studio. I mean, if you were to watch it on television, it's still the same hour and a half to 2 hours of your life.
Mm.
So how can, if you're an independent producer, what tricks might you offer to people who want to make their film like exist within the same ecosystem as those other bigger budget films and not look like it was made in high school?
Oh, like how to make your film look better?
how to make it better, how, like, what elements are gonna go into a film that don't matter whether they are made for $250,000 or made for $20 million.
Oh, well, you're gonna love the script revisions.
There
Like
you go.
like,
Yeah.
honestly, script revisions and test screenings. Obviously, it's one thing to make sure you have good lighting and good like, you can spend money, you can always spend more money, and you can always do more things to make sure what's on screen looks good, but nothing's gonna look as good as having a good story, and I'm, gonna get ostracized for this, but I find, in Canada, we have a really hard time with feedback on scripts and just not asking enough. We need more writers' rooms where people get together and give each other feedback and do it with absolute scrutiny as opposed to just
Mhm,
saying, yeah, you wrote a thing, good job. Brutal, brutal feedback is really, really important to the writing process. And doing all of that before you apply for funding
Yeah.
is going to be great. And then once you're in post, doing test screenings with people that aren't your friends and family. Like that's
yeah.
that's really the big difference between Canadian productions and American productions is like that constant testing and thinking about your audience as opposed to thinking about the film you want to make. Yes, you want to make your movie, but you also want to make your movie for an audience.
Right. That's an interesting way to look at it too, because I often say this. I said Canadians come up with really good ideas for stories, but we don't always tell the stories well.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
don't mean that as a bad thing. It's just we don't get that refinement of putting through the meat grinder of getting the feedback that says, okay, now the story is hitting. It's like a joke. Like Ken and I and you might have the same joke, but whoever can deliver it in the best way is the one who's going to get the laugh.
Absolutely. And Canadians are really smart and really good storytellers, and we're really, really funny. We're some of the funniest people in the world. Um,
Absolutely.
All
but
the
I,
bet like
We
that
export all our
SCTV
comedians.
group, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
but we don't often get the opportunity to show it because I find there's a little bit of a lack of that refinement stage that makes it tough to kind of compete on a global scale.
And that's budget agnostic, right? Like good storytelling and comedy and test screenings, you don't need that doesn't cost money. That's or it doesn't cost anything significant. What costs money is filming it and then realizing you don't have a story at the end.
Exactly. It's honestly it's sitting people down at the end of your or in the middle of your edit and grabbing a bunch of people and saying, "Hey, can you watch my movie?" And then sitting them down with a questionnaire that's like the first question should always be, "What do you think the story was?" And if they can't answer that or if they answer something completely different than what you think the story, that's your biggest problem.
So I'm gonna do a self-serving question here, but it's for people. But so like I'm a producer. I have a story. I have a script, whether I wrote it or whether I'm working with a friend or not on it. And in Canada, okay, so where do I go to get this? What resources are out there to get the kind of feedback I need to make the script as strong as possible before I even like approach telefilm or before I even get to that stage of trying to ask someone to fund the project.
I mean, someone needs to create something like Sandbox LA here. Do you guys know what that is?
No.
Tell us.
So there's a really great group. It's like a grassroots organization in LA that I was a part of for a little while called Sandbox. And it is this woman organizes it and she's just an absolute saint for doing it. And I don't know why she does it because I don't think she gets paid. But it's literally, I think it's like $10 a month and you pay to sign up for every week you go to a group of strangers and you submit 20 pages a week and it's like 4 or 5 people in your group and you each give feedback on each other's 20 pages. There's like a different group every day of the week and there's enough people that there are like intense like groups every day of the week and every month there's different signups and I think it's like a 3 month cycle, so the idea is that you can get through an entire feature, but somebody
Mm.
needs to put that together and like putting that together with people you know and people you don't know so you're not just getting your friends is really important. And I know certain people have kind of been trying to do that independently, but we need more structure, I think, around it. Just like more structured feedback groups would be, I think, really important.
And teaching those teams, like those producers and writers, like how to receive that kind of feedback properly. Like you said, people are very protective of their vision or their whatever their it is like that, like almost like if you give criticism on their script, you're critiquing their entire life choice.
Yeah.
It's very we're very precious about our emotional attachment to what we wrote.
Yeah, it's someone's opinion on your work. It's not, the be all end all. It's up to you to change it if you want to, but it's always good to have outside opinions.
Also, giving notes is a bit of an art form as well, because again, I'm a writer. This is my life,
You
and a lot of times you end up getting notes from people who are like, well, I would have done this, and it's like, no, no, but that's not a good note, because that's what you would have done. I need you to make what I've done better, right? And there's a difference there where some people just don't like, well, this is how I would have told the story. It's like, that's cool. This is how I'm telling the story, but I need to make it as good as can be in my way with my voice. And again, not being precious about anything, but you need to be able to sort of cut through the bullshit that way. And so I agree, there needs to be more resources for writers in this country. Creative BC just launched this program that I'm a part of for the first one. It's like Develop BC. It's with the Pacific Screenwriting Institute or whatever it is, and so they have like mini development rooms for TV shows. So I'm working with Brad Wright at the end of the month for
Awesome.
1 week in a mini room to help him develop his show. And programs like that, that's just a great way to help writers out in BC. On the feature side, I'm not exactly sure if there's anything. I think that sandbox idea is fantastic.
If I had more time, I'd do it, but
Yeah. I taught for a little while at the Vancouver Film School at the writing campus. And the one thing I was telling the students, because like we would workshop scripts all the time. And I was like, the only thing that's really good about film school is that you're just meeting other people that are like-minded, but you're able to get instant feedback and keep workshopping these things. And that's what you're going to miss once you graduate. And I was like, find a group, right? Find, and like what you said, Amanda, finding people that you don't know.
Like, I think that that's where being good producing comes in, wouldn't you say, Amanda? Where like being a producer is not just about like the line producing, the numbers. Like I fall into that same category of just like, let's figure out how to solve the problem of making the film, but that overall picture of, is this film ready to be made? And
Yes.
it doesn't mean that any idea, like almost everybody has a good idea for a story, for a screenplay that could be turned into a movie with the right guidance. And if you take that time a year before you even go into production, you're gonna. We were talking the other day that a script doesn't get better in once you start prep. It has to already be there before you got to prep. Like it doesn't improve in production.
Well, and a script serves two purposes. And I think sometimes people forget that is that it serves a purpose to tell the story. So it has the emotional arc and it helps, with obviously the cast need to tell the story and the director and the creatives, but it's also a blueprint for production.
Right.
So if you don't have your script solid by the time you are going into prep and you're constantly making changes, production isn't able to do their job properly. If you're constantly making changes, props is going to have to keep pulling stuff, set deck is going to have to keep making changes, location, like it's a domino effect for every department. Small changes make big domino effects. So, it makes it really, really challenging when you're having constant revisions, as we all know from our dips into TV as well, where there is constant revisions and it is crazy.
Sometimes you don't even get a script until 2 days before camera,
2 days
right?
before production.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
And
and isn't that funny how like you say with the script, like the script is a blueprint. It's like, I mean, it goes from being a work of poetry to being a series of tasks and expenses that have to be addressed. Like
Yes.
that, every time there's the name of a person in the script, it's going to cost an actor in terms of
Mhm.
money, right?
Yeah.
Like every time there's a person that's put in there, every time you say an item or a how or a location, it's like all of a sudden that's a cost.
Yeah. I teach a budgeting workshop often throughout the year, just because people ask me to. And a big part of what I teach is breaking down scripts and how to break it down and how to, figure out what a scene will cost because of all the different things that you have to highlight and think about and all the things that are written between the words. And, I never ask writers to think about budgets when they're writing. But then all of a sudden, I'm faced with a page that I'm like, wow, that was way more expensive than I expected.
yeah.
Um, so it's a good skill to have.
On that note, there's also there's the script that you're trying to sell, and then there's the script that you shoot, right? And so this is maybe more true for TV than a movie, but in TV we write these pilots, and they have to be colorful and with flowery language and evocative and engaging and emotional. And then you sell it, and then you go into prep, and that's when you have to rewrite part of it to just be very Spartan and very literal with like, no, 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 there's three guys in a room, one's doing this, one's doing this, one's doing, and it could have been written entirely different when you were selling that scene, right? To paint the
Mhm.
picture in the reader's mind. Because I've been in the situation, it was on Falling Skies. I remember one of the writers on the show wrote this sequence that it was kind of like this dream sequence thing, and ended up, the makeup effects team ended up, submitting a budget for $70,000, and the producer's like, "What's this? Like, I can't afford this for this scene." And the showrunner's like, "Oh, no, no, that was just like a metaphor in the description. It's like, we don't. That's not literally. It's not on camera." And it's like, then just take it out because we don't care. You know, this is a production draft. It's not the pilot draft that you're trying to sell to Netflix.
That'd be crazy. Yeah.
The props guy doesn't care what the beautiful what the metaphor you were trying to go with is. They just want to know that it's a red chair or a red, it's a red phone, not a blue phone. What do you see right now as the biggest challenge facing sort of producers at this in this world that we're living in, especially in the indie space? I mean, we can get into this sort of the more studio Hollywood space, but what do you see as a producer as your biggest challenge right now?
I mean, in this very moment today, the LA
Yeah.
fires
Mm.
are the biggest challenge because it's held up all decisions for everything because all the decision makers are dealing with the fact that they've like all lost their homes. So that's horrible. Yeah, just
Yeah.
makes me so sad. And also just it's slowed everything down. Again, we're dealing with a huge film recession, obviously from the pandemic, from the strikes, now the fires. It's just, we used to have this like incredible wealth of people that would have day jobs and then have their night jobs and also be able to help us out and all those kinds of things because indie film is not the most lucrative. Like we don't have the highest budgets. So it relies on a lot of people to take, you know, lesser budget projects. So you just don't have access to that kind of talent anymore. We're all hoping that film picks up and then that won't be an issue anymore. But here's hoping. A lot of people have left film. But in general, in the bigger sense of the world, I think we are dealing with a distribution issue
Yeah.
which everybody can talk about until the cows come home. Nobody has quite figured out how to reach audiences correctly yet. I have a theory about Twitch that I will tell people about every day. And then I think Twitch is the next thing. I think the distribution problem it really comes from theaters are have a certain place for certain movies. Obviously since the DVD boom ended, like we haven't quite figured that out. Streamers are now reverting back to like traditional TV models. Everybody's kind of sick of paying for all these streamers. It's like nobody's kind of figured out how they want to watch content yet. Vertical shows are now becoming a thing, but they're kind of like trash TV. It's like eating junk food. Nobody's really figured out how they want to consume content anymore. And there's a lot of it. Like in Canada in particular, like we can't pay for our movies as independent producers because we just don't have the population. If everyone in Canada watched your movie, it just wouldn't be enough because we're just so small.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's part of the reason why like the US does so much better. They just have more people. So
yeah.
yeah, it's just like a
It's a factor, right? I mean, when you have 400 million people, you don't need everybody to see your movie for it to actually have box office success.
it's hard to make a movie that everybody loves and it's hard to make a movie that you love and make those two meet. So and how do you make something everybody's going to want to watch when you have so few people in your country and they're all completely different. So distribution is really tough.
Well, and to put it in perspective for anybody listening, like there are just as many people in California as there are in all of Canada.
That's really, really tough. People are going to theaters, but they're going for the big shows.
And I found just this happened to me the other day where again, I love going to the theater and I'm always looking at what's coming out and what can I go see. And there was one film that my girlfriend and I were going to go check out, and we were planning to go. And then I also saw that it's available for rent at home all of a sudden. And it just came out a few weeks ago, and I'm like, well, I guess we can just rent it and watch it here as much as I want to see it in the theater. That part of the distribution thing. Quentin Tarantino just went on a huge rant about this at
Mhm.
Sundance, right?
We're not windowing anymore. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
So
because you
really
can't afford it anymore because you've got to start. There has to be some kind of revenue stream going sooner that, and the box office isn't giving it to you.
yeah. And honestly, I think a big problem with going to the theater these days, and I'm like a victim to this, is I have a better experience watching a movie at home because people in the theater drive me crazy.
Right?
People don't have theater etiquette anymore. And I think it's after
No.
the pandemic, everyone was at home for so long, we kind of forgot how to have a
Yeah.
social
Yep.
contract. So you go to the theater, everybody's talking, everybody's on their phone, everybody's crunching candies really loudly. Why don't we have quiet candy? I don't know.
That I don't know. Yeah.
Like, it's really distracting, and we have
Mhm.
such a short attention span, so of course people are on their phones. I know there was the big conversation about trying to make phone sections at one point, which is insanity.
What? I didn't hear
Yes,
this.
Oh,
I've heard of
yeah.
that too.
It was wild to me. So the theatrical experience, as it feels like, especially as someone who comes from like the actual like live theater background where you used to dress up to go, it was an event. It
Yeah.
feels like going to a movie theater is now just like disregarded. It's no longer an event. It's now just, you know, people hanging out and like they're at their house. But it's not supposed to be.
No.
No, and like you said, that etiquette isn't there, and that and it's not it hasn't been brought up with us, right? Like when we were kids, we would go stand in line to go to see a movie, and we could afford to because it wasn't costing us a lot of money to do it. I mean, if our parents paid for it, it wasn't going to put everybody out a ton of money for that week. You could go to see 3 or 4 movies a week, and most of us could afford to go at least. And you just learn you didn't have to be taught etiquette in a movie theater. You just knew. Your parents always told you, "Be quiet, watch the movie," and then as you grew up, you just took that habit into the theaters when you went.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, if you go and there's kids there, oh my God, they're running everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, you're just sort of going hoping you won't be disturbed during the film, right? Like, you're just hoping that this is the one experience you're gonna get to just enjoy the
The
movie.
seat preview is a great tool though, because I do try to find screenings that aren't, the opening weekend, and then maybe not the matinee, but like a 3 o'clock type, like, okay, the theater's relatively empty. I'm gonna sit in this section.
Do feel bad because my fiance is like, he's a sound mixer and owns a post house. So he wants to go to the theater to hear like the true sound.
Yeah.
And then
Of
he wants
course.
to sit right in the middle where like the best
Yeah.
sound is. But that's always where everyone is. And I'm like, I can't. There's too many people. Like,
And the
Yeah.
theater's supposed to be a community experience. It's just the community experience where we sit and we watch the film together. We don't sit there and we and have our own experience watching the film. We sit there and we watch it together as a community, and we all agree to stay quiet for this 2-hour period, not to talk over each other.
yes, that is so right. Laughing and being scared with a community of strangers is such a unique
So
and
much fun.
satisfying experience.
Yeah.
I constantly think back, I can't even remember what movie it is, but there was like a Melissa McCarthy movie that I was laughing so hard I fell out of my seat at one point, and then the audience
Mhm.
was laughing at me, and I was like, it was like one of the best experiences of my life. I'm like, this is great.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, like, I remember watching There's Something About Mary in the movie theater, and the
Yeah. Yeah.
audience was just couldn't like, there were people who just couldn't, like, breathe, they were laughing so hard.
Yeah.
And everybody else is kind of part of that, like, how can you be having a bad day when half the audience can't stop laughing at something?
Exactly. Oh, it's so good.
Oh, I
Yeah.
miss the 90s.
So so so, Amanda, glass half full, you're a producer, you're gonna stay at this, I imagine, for a while.
I
Why?
should hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. But what's the upside? What's the bright side on all of this?
Like we said, there are no asshole policies. Like things are changing in terms of physical production. People are making hard decisions about the quality of set, about the hours that we're doing. My company in particular, we do 12-hour days, including prep and wrap. So I make some pretty hard lines. I have some pretty hard lines in terms of, harassment on set, zero tolerance for drugs, alcohol, all those kinds of things. And more people are making sure that we are treating people with kindness, respect, compassion, doing small things like I always have pronouns on call sheets. I have a rule in my company where we do 35% at least BIPOC crew members, but we've always hit 55 or more percent. So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
hard. And these are not unusual conditions of projects these days. And it's nice to see that coming more and more. So physical production is changing. The days of, doing cocaine in the boardroom is not really a thing anymore. So
Right.
it's nice to see that. Production is picking up. The LA fires obviously have like stalled us a little bit, but it is picking up. productions are coming back. Obviously, like our dollar is tanking in Canada, but that also is good for us because it means more people are coming here. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yay, upside. And also, more diverse stories are getting told. We are seeing more stories getting funded for bigger amounts of money from, unique perspectives. Which is important. Audiences are getting fatigued by Marvel movies, which is great
Mhm.
for us to see
Yeah.
more stuff coming out that is different and fun and interesting. We're seeing a resurgence of like cool feminist angry thrillers like The Substance. Wild, loved it.
Yeah.
um the Oscars this year, outrageous picks, so interesting. Like I think filmmaking, especially in the tier that I specialize in, which is like the mid-tier kind of like 5 to 20 range. This is our golden era of movies because we get to take more risks, we get to make more interesting projects. And I think we're going to see more and more cool things come out of that.
That's a
Yay.
great perspective. I'm glad to hear that because that makes it all worth it. It's always that balance between commerce and art and just trying to make tell good stories and tell your story, personal story, because that's what diverse storytelling really is. It's basically making sure that there's more people's voices are represented in interesting stories.
Yeah, I want to make people laugh, I want to make people cry, but I also just want to make sure we're doing it by not telling the same story over and over and over again.
And that budget range is because I had for many years that budget range of sort of 5 to 20 you were saying, it always felt like a no man's land or a no person's land. At,
I don't
at
I
least
don't necessarily think so. I think there's more, I mean, from the conversations I'm having, there's more of a push instead of spending $100 million on a movie to spreading that out to multiple movies because then there's less risk. And you're also not tied to having one of five bankable actors.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing a movie at $5 million, it's okay if you don't have the biggest, fanciest actor.
right.
So you can also greenlight things faster. So a lot of the budgets I'm getting are, $10 million, because it's easier and faster to greenlight. Having said that, you still need a good actor, but you don't necessarily have to have Robert De Niro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these films that
Right.
you're producing, say from the LA producers, are they studio funded or privately funded? How are these
A bit
being
of
funded?
both.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of all over the place. Sometimes it's like rich people with money, which is always nice. Thank you. Sometimes it's companies like, there'll be random telecommunications companies that I will not name that own other studio, like mid-tier studios that will
Mhm.
come to me. Sometimes it's actual studios. There's a lot of like mid-tier studios, like mini studios that exist that I think a lot of people don't consider because they
Mhm.
just don't know that they're around. That actually are actively constantly making things.
You're saying LA, is this exist in Canada at all, or
Nah,
it's not at all?
nah, we don't exist. There's not
No,
really
but I'm
like
just
there's not
do you
really
get
like
that
finance-
corporate interest or
there's not really like big financiers or like at least that I've experienced. I mean, there's what is it? Productivity, I think, is here.
right.
But also I'm not in Toronto, so I feel like if there is stuff, it's probably out there. Um,
But so why is that though? Because like why don't we I mean we have why don't we have that kind of investment or that kind of like private level interest in funding funding Canadian films? Is it just because they're not like you said, you can't feed your film on 40 million people?
yeah, I honestly I think it's just a population thing.
Really?
We just don't have we don't if you don't have the people to pay for the movie, then you don't have the movie.
I think it could come down to distribution, as you're saying. Like nobody's figured out that side of things yet in this new world, right? And I don't see any reason why there can't be a Canadian corporation that invests in film if we just go beyond the borders, right?
Mhm.
And it's a world marketplace. So I think there's a future for that. That's why like I'm really interested in indie film right now. And again, I come from like the Hollywood studio system, and like TV is its own separate thing where TV is just expensive. Some people are able to make an independent TV show right now, like Mark Duplass, but he's Mark Duplass. So
Yeah, who's gonna say no to him?
yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
exactly. And when you have millions of dollars or contacts that you can put this thing together,
But
then
that's
that's
2
fine.
decades of work too. That's 2 decades of of grinding
Exactly.
to get
Dean
to that.
Devlin's another one that makes independent TV, but those are different models. So TV aside, On the movie side of things, this is why I'm diving into indie film, because I think that like the Hollywood money is sort of locked up to some extent to a lot of these already established filmmakers, but there's so much money out there that isn't in Hollywood, and being able to tap into that and try to find those incentives for companies to get in. I don't know. I'm this is just what we're trying to explore and see what we can do in terms of putting our own movies together privately. But it is interesting to know more about the fact that like there are these like mid-tier studios that you're talking about. Maybe a lot of people don't know, and I don't know, something to explore.
And how many times have you been told just call 100 dentists to like
Yeah.
finance a movie? Oh, my dentist won't finance anything. I've tried. She's not into it. Like,
Well, and that's the thing, like, you're if you're trying to sell it as a good ROI, it's not a good, like, you can't lead with lead with ROI. It's not it that part isn't there,
you
right?
want to throw your money away?
Yeah, yeah, you want
Yeah,
well, and that investment in the arts is definitely there, but it's not the same level as you would see in the US, perhaps. Maybe that's that philanthropic sort of mindset in the States, and we don't have that charitable the private charitable level the way that they do in the United States either, where you donate to a opera house there and you get it. That's a major way to lower your tax bracket if you want to.
Well, and it's always that idea of what is it? You sell the steak or don't sell the steak, sell the sizzle, or sell the
Sell the
sizzle.
sizzle.
right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's like, being a EP on a film is like quite fancy for some people, and that's enough. Going to the red carpet with fancy actors is enough for some people. So that's maybe why they invest. Independently financing pilots is a big thing now, and making your own pilot episodes. So I've seen a lot
Mm.
of people trying to do that and trying to make those. So I'm really
That
curious.
I'll never understand, because there's no way that I just don't think there's any world where a studio like Netflix, for example, go watches it and is like, "Yep, great. Let's just make more of that exactly the same." Like not swapping out the cast, the crew, the location of where this is shot, like not it's a complete throwaway. It would have to be reshot no matter what, and probably recast. And I'm like, just I've had success to some extent with a pilot presentation, so I get that. But we sold that to Bell Media and we went into development. The show didn't get picked up, but like for all intents and purposes, it worked. But everybody knew going in that like if this happens, there will be new contracts drawn up, and this is a new thing. This is a new entity. So help us make this, help us sell it.
Like I always say, lightning doesn't strike twice. Obviously it worked for It's Always Sunny, but I don't. Did they reshoot that pilot? I don't know. Did they just use the original? I'm not really sure.
I think
Yeah,
they would have had to, but
yeah.
yeah, that did work for them for sure.
But that was quite the unique, like,
It's a unicorn,
thing.
right? Like,
Yeah,
and everybody will chase that. Everybody chases the $1 million spec script, right? Like, we all think that that if you get your script at Blacklist or something like that, that someone's going to come along and offer you $1 million for the script, and there you go, your career is made.
Yeah.
yeah, no.
For
Also,
some people that like want to shoot an independent pilot, though, again, I don't know. I guess you can make it for $5,000-$10,000 depending on your resources. But say you're spending $50,000 on this thing, make a $50,000 movie.
mhm.
Your chances of success are so much greater because you can actually go and sell that movie. But you can't do anything with that pilot other than take it to a TV studio that will likely pass on it, and then it's dead. It doesn't help anybody at that point.
If you're gonna make a demo, whether it's like a demo piece of a movie or a pilot or whatever it is, make it good. Because if it looks bad, like if it's
Yeah,
shot poorly, if it has a bad actor in it or whatever, because you don't have enough money to like do it properly, it's gonna tank your project. Like whoever you show it to, if they had an image in their mind of what the project was when they were reading it or looking at your pitch deck, it's ruined now by whatever your bad
Version of it is.
yeah.
Yeah.
I remember a story of a friend who had a movie that Netflix back when they were making like pumping out originals like crazy.
Mm.
She had a movie that like they were really, really, really interested in, and then she showed them the demo, and they're like that was done.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is that it doesn't show anything other than, again, like it all comes down to, first of all, if the story's good, it will work better. But you do have to your production value is in your cast too. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be that A-list cast member, but that
You have
they
to
have to
act well.
deliver. Yeah,
Yes.
they have to deliver, right? Like, they have to do something that shows that, "Oh, wow, this is I'm drawn into the story." Because if I'm thinking of it clinically, you tell me there's a story, a space story about a, battle in space, like, that sounds interesting, but anybody can make that.
Yep.
If we just have the right money, we can make anything. It's like, what makes that story unique and interesting and compelling enough for me to be drawn in? And you at least need to. It's like a good pitch. If you again, same two people can give the same two pitches, and one can blow it out of the water, and the other person can tank the project by
Mhm.
just not delivering it properly, right?
And we're really lucky nowadays with pitch decks and lookbooks that we have so many great resources online, that
Mhm.
it's kind of impossible to make a crappy one now, especially with like Canva. Um, and like there's kind of no excuse to make
Right.
bad.
Yeah, it has to be good, right? Like,
Yeah,
you can't just slap together a few tiny images and bad fonts and say, "Oh,
yeah.
but the idea is in there." You just have to look for the idea.
No, it's like you have to use like those really great like shot deck images. You have to, make sure it's got like clear font. You have to make sure it's got the really great clear ideas because that's how you're communicating visually. It's
So,
important.
Amanda, if I had $2 million to make a movie and I've raised it, I've with tax credits, whatever it is, like, it's all financed at $2 million, and we're good to go. But how would you approach that, and what would you be looking at to maximize the value of that 2 million so it shows up and it can compete with the best of them?
How much of it is going to above the line?
There's a good question. So I guess that's the question. So let's just say arguably 25%. So let's just say 500,000 is going above the
Because
line.
the trick is with a $2 million movie, it's like, are you spending $1 million of that on your lead actor? Uh,
Right.
are you spending $250,000 of that on your lead actor? That's always the first question I get, or I ask when I get a budget of a movie, because sometimes they'll be like, "Oh, it's a $10 million movie," but it's five of it is going to cast.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
or you're left with like $1 million from that for production.
Yeah.
Um, if I had $2 million every time I do a budget, what if it's $2 million, 20% of that is going to post. Because
Okay.
if I don't do that, then my poor fiance screams at me.
Yeah.
Um,
Nice.
and then by the time you're done budgeting, it's usually like 10 or 15%. But
Yeah.
you start off
It starts
Yeah.
at 20.
if it's a visual effects heavy idea, then it's like probably the full 20% or more. Visual effects are expensive.
Yeah.
1.5 to 2% is going to legal. Yeah, probably like 25% is going to above the line. So like your director, whatever. On $2 million, if you're shooting in BC, this is like my line producer brain going through the checklist. On $2 million, if you're shooting in BC, chances are you are going DGC for
Right.
your director, your ADs, and your locations. And you're going to go 669 for camera under their low budget agreement because
Mhm.
non-union camera is scary. And everyone else is going to be non-union. Anything under 5 million, I would do in that kind of model. I wouldn't like try to go ACFC or anything. Sorry, ACFC, because you're just going to spend way too much on fringes because the fringes on ACFC is like 31%, whereas non union fringes are 16. So you just end up saving so much money. In BC, the tax credit is labor based. So I always say maximize your labor by, trying to make sure you're paying your kit fees through labor and on time cards, paying like major kits like a DIT kit or a sound kit that way so that you can get your labor back. And I always try to take advantage of that by like paying people more money than spending
Right.
more money on materials. So I try to
Yeah.
make a deal with like Set Deck where I'm like, hey, I would rather give you guys way more labor to spend the time building these things than spend more money on materials. Because I would also rather put money in people's pockets. And then I would, on $2 million, I would call Sunbelt, formerly William F. White's, or MBS, whoever is your favorite. And then I would beg for my life for good
Yes.
tier
Get as
deals.
much free stuff. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
so you're thinking, like, it's basically boiling down to you're 25. Let's just say your fiance wins the battle, and it's 20% there, and it's 25% on the above the line, and then it's basically 50%. This is is it's a 50% on the production side of things, and then of course you need contingency and all that other stuff to
Yeah,
fit
and
into the.
contingency is typically supposed to be 10%, which a lot of people miss out on.
Is it the whole budget, like including
Yes,
above the line? Okay.
yes. But on a movie under 5 million, you can get away with like 5%. If you're bonded which for anyone who doesn't know what a bond is, it's a company that guarantees that your film is going to get made. You actually pay them a fee. And if you're screwing up your film so badly, they will come in and take over your movie to make sure it gets made. They don't guarantee the quality of the film, they just guarantee it gets made. So financiers love them because of the guarantee. They are very expensive. They also charge a fee of like 2% of your entire project to do it, which is expensive, but they require a 10% contingency in your budget and also like a million pieces of paper. But you could do a 5% contingency, which would be fine
If you're not bonded.
if you're not bonded. Yeah, which
Right.
at 2 million, you're probably not. You know, obviously focus on trying to use as little locations as possible and trying to base camp out of like one place and then very little moves.
Right.
Just
Because
Cut
that
down
gets
on the
rid of the
transportation
transport.
department.
That transport cost. Yeah, I love transport, but they're expensive.
It's
Yeah, and time.
honestly, the more time you spend shooting, the better off you are. The more coverage you
Right.
get, the better off you are. You don't ever wanna come back and have to do reshoots. You just wanna, like, stay in one place, base camp it, because you're gonna get better performances, you're gonna get people more comfortable just staying where you are and doing mini moves.
No, that's good for this hypothetical movie. That's some really great advice.
Yeah,
Mhm.
everything within a kilometer of your base camp.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it makes it so much easier. If you have to shoot in like 5 houses, just like pick a small neighborhood, pick a cul-de-sac if you can. Try really hard to, if you're doing a low budget movie like 2 million, to try and not do a ton of nights. You're gonna fatigue your crew, you're gonna fatigue your actors, you're not gonna get good performances. If you have to tent a bunch of stuff, blackout materials is really expensive. Yeah, it's really tough to do a lot of nights for people. And I know a lot of horror movies are cheaper ones, but they're expensive to do at night.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like to stay within that sort of humane no assholes policy of trying to keep things at that 12 hour, no more than 12. We don't we keep the crew happy, and every as long as everybody's happy. What are some of the tips you'd say to keep your crew happy and enjoy and be willing to work at that budget level, because they know that even though we might try to pad their rates with kit fees and so on.
Yeah, the person I will spend money on is the first AD. Because if you have a good first AD, your production will go well. That's the person everybody's listening into in their ear all day long. And it's also the
Mhm.
person that's going to keep you to those 12-hour days for including prep and wrap. Sometimes that means you're doing an 8-hour shoot day. And it's also making sure that your director understands that from the beginning and everybody understands that. Also, a concept meeting from the first moment of prep to make sure everyone is making the same movie
Mhm.
is so critical. And if you feel like the movie is slipping off course and maybe the production designer is kind of fighting with like the costume designer or like somebody's like have another concept meeting, continue to have concept meetings or like department meetings in person, put people face to face. Like Zoom is
Right.
helpful, but like put people face to face. Face to face prep is really important because there's ways people communicate with their body that you can't communicate over phone or email. And if you continue to put people in person, they will communicate better, they will understand the story that they're trying to tell, and they will work through their problems. It's your job to, as a producer, to pay attention to how people are working together so you can kind of like socially engineer through challenges. And, I worked with a director once who would make all the department heads sit in a meeting every morning for like an hour, which is really hard because it's hard to get your prep done when you're like in a meeting everywhere. I think that was like a little excessive, but it did work. And some projects it does necessitate that. So
Well, it's a team building too, right? Like that's that idea is like it's sometimes the best communication isn't necessarily the direct, like, okay, so what's the color of this or what are we doing? It's also that whole like, okay, let's ground everything. Let's make sure we're all playing the same game here. We're all in the same sandbox, working together. And we reinforce that every day. So that idea of like you have that one initial concept meeting and then you send everybody off and we all come back together on the first day of production. It does pit departments against each other because everybody just starts to focus in on their own world and then cuts everybody else off.
exactly. Yeah, it makes it really tough. My one of my mottos is information for everyone. I don't like
Mhm.
the idea of like cutting people out of conversations. I love, if there's a schedule available, share it with everybody. Like there's no reason to not have information for everyone, literally. We're all making the same movie, so let's make it together.
Yeah, and even
Oh,
just on that
love
note, that
it.
reminds me of like, at the top end of the Hollywood system, like Christopher Nolan movies, you don't even get the script. Department heads would have to fly down to Warner Brothers, go into a secure room that has a video camera, with a script. You sign in, you have to leave your phone out of the room. You get to read the script and make notes, but they will not send you the script. And so, like, God help you if you are not a department head. Like, you don't know, you're just getting notes and directions from the department head of like, this is what we have to buy, this is what we have to build. And like, that's like the Star Wars movies and Nolan films and, sides that are printed on red paper with gray text so they can't be photocopied. Like, it's like, come on,
Yeah.
we're making popcorn here, people.
But to be fair, you're also taking 8 to 10 months of prep. It is a bit in that world. It's like you're getting that in, maybe you're getting that information in pieces, but you're also able to get going. You're able to figure out the details a little bit more. Like on an indie film, we're getting what, like 6 weeks max, and maybe 4 with like full crew.
Yeah, I did. I one of my best friends is a line producer in the States. I like to think of him as like American me. Shout out to Max if he ever listens to this. And we've been working through a budget in BC, like moving a movie to BC. And I had to explain to him, I was like, no, 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 you have to have more prep here though, like than in the States, because he's used to indies in the States having like 4 weeks prep. And I was like, no, 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 you have to have like 6 here because it takes longer here to get materials because shipping here takes longer.
Yeah.
Uh, so like if you're ordering stuff, indie filmmakers, don't shortchange yourself on prep because you won't have costumes because they'll take forever to ship here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's a great point.
6 weeks of prep would be like your sweet spot of sort
It's
of
kind
like.
of the minimum, I think. I try really hard to do like if I can 8 weeks plus 2 weeks of just pure scouting. Because if you can do or even 2 weeks of pure scouting and then 6 weeks. If you can do 2 weeks of just scouting with the director, location manager, production designer, the DP, and the first AD, and just like literally lock all of your major locations, that is your blueprint for everyone else to get working. If you
For
don't have
sure.
those like top major locations locked, no one else can do anything. You don't know your color palette, you don't know how you're going to block things, you don't know what anything's going to look like, you don't know where you're going to be, you don't know logistic, like it just everything else starts with locations. And I think a lot of people underestimate the power of a good location and the art behind it. So taking your
Mhm.
time to actually like make sure it's right is really.
When someone hears this right now, that's probably going to save them $500,000 right there, I think. No, because like you said, like that panic and rush of having 2 weeks to go and having, 2/3 of your locations still not locked and confirmed yet is the thing that pulls everybody's hair out and causes everybody to work on weekends and just trying to like jury rig, reverse engineer something to make it work.
Wait until you hear my theory about weekend work. Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right, bring it
there you
on.
go.
If someone emails you on a weekend, it's not important. Don't answer it. Nobody should answer emails on weekends.
Oh, I love it.
If somebody calls you, it's an emergency.
Yeah.
But other
Right.
than that, no. Your weekend is yours.
Well, look, we have taken up so much of your time. This has been amazing. There's so much great information here for indie producers out there. Amanda, thank you for all of this. Before we wrap up, we always like to ask people if there's like one piece of advice that you can share. And you've already given so much advice, which is lovely. But one more piece of advice that you can share with any indie producers or filmmakers out there. What would that be?
Egos don't belong in film, and jealousy doesn't belong in film. We're all here to rise together. So, if somebody is succeeding and social media is like the worst for this, if you see someone else succeeding and doing things that you want to do, let it be an inspiration. Don't let it drag you down. It can be really easy to feel really crappy about it. Especially when 90% of independent producing is filling out applications and getting rejected. It can feel really gross. So just know that everyone's on their own journey and you're doing the right thing.
And where can people find you, Amanda?
Ironically, I'm on a social media break right now,
Ah,
but
perfect.
I still have my accounts for when I'm back. I'm on Instagram and TikTok under Notable Amanda because my company is Notable Studios, and my TikTok has a lot of like, here's cool stuff about independent producing and how to not be an asshole. So
All right. Well, thank you so much.
All right, so that was such a great chat with Amanda. I feel like she's just one of those people that you can talk to for hours and hours about this, and I think we easily could have, but I have to wrap this up eventually.
Yeah.
So, like, what were some of the things that stood out for you from that great discussion?
Well, I mean, fully nerded out on this discussion because from a purely being on the logistics side of filmmaking most of the time, I really appreciated Amanda's perspective on putting film projects together. Bottom line, I loved her perspective on saying, the most important thing you can work on as an independent filmmaker, as a filmmaker in general, is to make sure your script is working
Yeah.
and make sure that the script and the story are working before anything else gets started, because that ultimately in the end is going to be the most important part of your story, or of
Yeah.
that's going to be the most important part of anything you put out there.
Yeah, without a script, you don't have anything. It's it's just, synced picture and sound. And if it doesn't make any sense, it's not going to move anybody. That's a common thing that all of our guests have been saying, right? Like the script, the script, the script. And so even coming from a producer slash line producer like Amanda, it's just so important that somebody who's just worried primarily about the financial side of the movie is even still saying no, but it has to be a tight script, because that also is going to determine how much they're spending in certain areas, right? You can
Mm.
plan ahead. It just gives you the ability to really make the most of the budget that you have.
Yeah, and it's knowing where you get the most production value out of the money that you are spending. Like if the main point of the story is, for example, the jump scares because you're making a horror film, or it's action moments or so on, that's where you want to spend your money. You want to spend your money on the parts that the audience is coming to see, as opposed to trying to make a one size fits all budget approach to everything. You put your money where it's going to be on the screen the most and where it's going to impact the audience the most. And what I really liked about how she approaches her budget is to say, like, what are we trying to get out of this movie, and what are we what's going to make the most impact. If we spend our money here, is this going to really make the most impact on the film? That's budget agnostic, right? Like it could be $100 million movie, it could be a $2 million movie. It's about how do you allocate those resources to make the best product in the end.
I also thought it was fun how we sort of broke down a $2 million movie with her and her perspective and instinct in where to put that money, where to, how to spend that money, right? 25% for above the line. What was it? Roughly 20% for post production, but we knew that would probably end up getting knocked down to 15%. And then,
Right.
the rest for other below the line costs. The one thing that stood out from that, actually, just talking about post production, is that seems to be a number that, like, we on my last film, we under budgeted because we figured, well, like it's a short film and you can maybe get some good people to, do a favor for us here and there. But sometimes there are just hard costs with post production that you just can't get around. And
Mhm.
like a sound designer, we talked to multiple sound designers and it was all just like, okay, well, it's going to be, again, this was a short, a feature would be more expensive, but like say around $6,000. And it's like, okay, well, we have to figure that out. We have to find that somewhere. You can sometimes get favors with main unit crew, sometimes, but with post production, there are just, and like studio rental space or sound mixing stages or color, like company three, coloring costs. These things are just baked into their business plan. So it's sometimes hard to get around those.
And no, but it's also the thing of understanding that the budget has to cover the cost of the whole movie, not just the production side. The production side is gathering all the materials
Yeah.
on the construction site, and then the editing and the post production are where we put it all together. You if you don't put that money into post production in the right way, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to pay top dollar for everything. But if you don't spend for a good sound edit, you'll notice it. The movie will be impacted by a poorly sound designed film if it's not done right. If you need some ADR, which is, if you need to loop in some sound later because
Yeah.
your actor dialogue wasn't as clean as it needed to be on the day, you have to put that time in and you have to put that money in to make a good movie. The movie has to be good in the end, and if you're going to spend all that money just shooting the film and not spending the time actually trying to make the post production better, then you're doing a disservice to your film.
Yeah. If there's any advice that I can give in terms of budgeting for post, is that, yeah, don't lowball yourself with post production. And that's really where the film is made, right? And the degree to which the film gets better at each stage is staggering. And so you go from a
Mhm.
rough cut to like the final output delivery, and it's a different movie. It looks different, it sounds different, it's all better, and hopefully because you're spending the money to make it better. But yeah, it's don't shortchange yourself with that.
And that's one of the things that Amanda mentioned too was giving yourself time to do test screenings, like proper test screenings, because again,
Totally.
you only have one chance to finish this film and to create a one final product that a mass audience is going to see. It's occurred to me in theory before, but it didn't really hit home until I thought about it when she mentioned it. Was why wouldn't you test out the film in while you're putting it together in post production to see if there's anything you can do to fix the film before it gets shown to a mass audience? And I loved her one question that she suggested to put in the survey that you show to your test audience, which is something like, what do you think this film was about?
Yeah.
And if it's not this, if your audience isn't getting the same answer as the answer you wanted, you might have an issue. There might be something you need to solve.
Yeah, test it out, right? With my last short, we tested it so many times, different versions. Some had, a scene missing that we thought maybe we could lose, but it turns out we couldn't lose it because all the feedback was like, this story doesn't make any sense. We're like, well, that was the scene that helped it make sense, so we're gonna put it back in.
And her interesting comment about how Canadians are so protective of their stories that we don't handle the critique of the story well enough.
Yeah.
And she says, in America, you just sort of get the script notes and you either solve them or fix them, or you might not get funded or something like that. Whereas in Canada, we're so protective of our stories that we're afraid to take it out and show it to people and get that vetting process done properly before we actually go into production.
Well, people are so precious. I think that comes with experience, and for me, I've worked in a writer's room where, yeah, I've had scripts torn apart to the point where I was like, "Am I being fired?" I wasn't fired, but yeah, and you just develop a thicker skin, just like an actor going out for auditions, right? The more auditions that you do,
Right.
the thicker skin you develop. You know that the default answer is going to be no. And so the
Right.
default answer when you hand in a script that is your first draft, which technically shouldn't ever be your actual first draft, you call it a first draft, but you've revised it a whole bunch. You should expect people to tear it apart. In fact, that's what you should ask for is, be constructive, but be honest. Is this working? If it doesn't make any sense, then it's not going to work down the road. And don't be precious about just needing positive feedback to serve your own ego. Get over it. Get over yourself. The script needs to suck at first so that you can make it better. And it will get better,
Mhm.
but it takes hard work. And you have to have the attitude of just wanting to make the best script possible and tell the best story possible, whatever it takes.
We're not Mozart in that we just sit down at the piano and just start crafting the masterpiece from our heads. Like, you have to dump out your brain, get it on paper, take a look at it, sift out the stuff that doesn't work, mold the clay, and turn it into something. And then you have to make the film and then get into the edit room. And then, our first cut on 13 Miles was 2 hours and 35 minutes long. So we knew when we got to that end of that first cut that there's no way we can keep this movie at 2 hours and 35 minutes long. Like even just practically,
Yeah.
it's not a movie it's not a movie that should be over 2 hours. We,
Yeah.
we knew that for the audience we were aiming it for, 2 hours and 30 minutes was too long. So we knew we had to cut 40 minutes from the film. But when you finish the first rough draft of it, you're thinking to yourself, well, what could I cut? What am I
Yeah.
going to cut from this film? It's going to take 40 minutes out of the film.
Yeah. But you found a way.
You find a way. You cut entire storylines sometimes. Like I'm sure you've done it too, where it's like you go through and an entire storyline that you were precious about suddenly
Yeah.
is no longer part of the story.
Okay, so that's it for this week's episode of Off the Lot. We want to hear from you. If there are any topics you want covered or any questions you'd like answered, please email us at podcast.offthelot@gmail.com.
And you can also find us on Instagram and YouTube. Our handles are in the show notes. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe, and share this with your friends. See you next week.